name's Christopher Brenna. I'm the managing director of Revolutionary Earth, and I founded Revolutionary Earth last year. I want to try and share my screen here. Is that something that I'm allowed to do and able to do?
Yep, absolutely.
Can I confirm that people can see what I've got in front of me?
We are seeing a Revolutionary Earth slide.
Okay, perfect. So, I want to begin with a short story about a very long journey that has to do with food insecurity. It starts 1,200 miles away in 2 counties in Southern California, where we get most of our fresh produce. That produce is picked about 2 weeks on average before it actually arrives here in Minnesota. It takes a journey of 1,200 miles in which it's preserved, picked unripe so that it can be preserved more readily, and then it is ripened most of the time artificially with chemicals. By the time it arrives in Minnesota, it may spend an extra week on the shelves in our grocery store waiting to be bought by us. Together with the grocery store where we buy it, we are going to waste about 15% of the produce that arrives in this state. And meantime, there are a lot of people in our, about 10% of the average Minnesota city of people that are experiencing food insecurity. So the thing I would like to point out right off the bat is that food insecurity is an issue that affects all of us, especially when we're talking about, it's particularly poignant to know that those 2 counties where most of our produce comes from is currently in a state that is mostly on fire. And so, do we have a secure system? No, we do not. And that's an issue that affects all of us. Obviously, it affects some people more than others. So the mission of Revolutionary Earth Farm is eliminating food insecurity in our households by growing gardens in our backyards. And the way that we do that, our primary model, is we ask people, residents of Rochester, Minnesota, to donate their backyards, use of their backyard, to grow a vegetable garden. We go in with volunteers and convert the lawn into the garden. We tend to with volunteers and we deliver it to food insecure subscribers to our weekly CSA every week during the growing season for free. Our vision for our city is to feed everyone in the city with food grown in the city. I wanted to tell you really briefly what we did in 2019. It was our first year. We had 4 farm locations, which is what we call our gardens. We started delivering in the end of July with 2 households. We delivered half bushel boxes of vegetables, and we managed to deliver for about 11 weeks. And at the season's end, we were delivering to 14 households. We did that with about 15 volunteers. We were a very small movement. Last year, we tried to do big things. We were excited about what we did. COVID really changed things. In 2020, we have 18 farm locations this year. We started with 22 households. We doubled the amount of produce that we give people. We are coming up on 15 or 16 weeks of delivery. And we now deliver every week to 43 households. We've also added delivery of bread and milk. And this is not leftover bread from the bakeries and milk that has been offered in the supermarket first. This is milk donated from Capper's Big Red Barn. and bread baked fresh for us the same day by Great Harvest. We don't accept leftovers. We only deliver the freshest food to the poorest people, and we do that first. So we exploded this year. I think it's safe to say from the numbers that that's what has happened. The statistic that I left off of these slides is the number of people that showed up for us. Last year I said we had about 15 people. This year we've had over 100 volunteers come out. And so in the midst of a pandemic where people were shutting down, circling the wagons, social distancing, we had an amazing group of people walk into the fire and agree to help people that were less fortunate than them. So we've been really excited about what we've been able to do this year. Right now at season's end, we're focused on where we can go from here. So what we need in 2021 is a group of donors as audacious as our volunteers and stewards, which is what we call our homeowners. Our volunteers and stewards have offered countless hours making sure that our gardens are a success. And we did this last year with 0 donations. This year, we raised over $20,000 to equip our volunteers to keep them safe during the pandemic and to keep our subscribers safe by delivering food that we knew was free of the virus. We also outfitted all of our farms with the best equipment to keep our volunteers safe and for them to work more efficiently. But we need to match the growth that we've had in labor and in land with the funding to keep up with it. So you can support us by going to Facebook or Instagram. You can volunteer. Believe it or not, we have a huge organizational structure behind what we do in the gardens. We have about 40 people in leadership, and we still need more. We're currently most in need of grant writers and people who are willing to serve on our finance board or on our board of directors. Don't be discouraged if you live in Mankato. The person who wins the award for farthest flung is a grant writer of ours that lives in Norway. So, and then if you want to donate or start a fundraiser, you can go to revolutionaryearth.org/donate. And I'll put a link to that in the chat. So that's all I've got. Really appreciate being able to come and present to you guys today. And I welcome any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Christopher. As we move to Q&A, if people can post their questions in the chat or raise your hand using the participants function, I will call on you so that you can ask your question. I actually see Tyler has his hand raised.
Hi. So largely the reason that overwhelming amount of produce is produced in those 2 counties is twofold, right? The weather, year-round weather that provides vegetables and fruits at any point in the year, and then soil quality. That presents a problem here in Minnesota where, half the year is not suitable for growing food and provides insecurities during those times. So I guess my question is, do you have a plan for growing food that provides nutrients and security to the poorest among us that this program provides during the winter?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. We have a plan to scale up to be a year-round home delivery CSA. Right now we are a seasonal CSA, home delivery CSA, that does delivery of non-produce items during the winter months. So we'll continue our delivery of bread and milk. We're adding cheese and butter and things like that. We will work with people that grow during the winter in greenhouses in the area, and then eventually, the same way that we sort of crowdsource backyards, we plan to crowdsource garages to grow indoors. So that's something that we're sort of reaching for, but we just don't have the capacity to do right now, just in our second season. But yeah, that's a great question.
Awesome. Yvonne had the next question.
Yeah. So we a lot of it is word of mouth. We do ask around on Facebook. We've sort of grown organically. We have started to work with a lot of local community groups, so youth groups, and actually groups like 1 Million Cups. People that because we find that groups really get a lot done when they come to do a farm project for us. So there are no paid staff. We do have a plan for the coming year. We're sort of furiously writing grants to fund some salaries. We really need a volunteer coordinator. We would really like an educator. Our plan, one of our projects for next year, is to form a youth congress, which will be a group of teenagers and kids in their the tweens, I guess you call them now. We want to put them in charge of their own garden, and have them be able to be assisted with how to grow things, and then they'll get to decide how that produce is distributed. We're an organization that focuses on radical empowerment. So our volunteers are usually immediately put in charge of whatever they're interested in working on. We find that that's been a great way for us to grow quickly.
And just in case anyone can't follow chat, the two questions he just answered, one was how they recruit people to plant the gardens, and then the second is, did they have a plan to eventually add paid staff? David Dempster had his hand raised next.
Yeah, the question I have is, your need for additional space for plots to grow stuff. Do you have a pretty big, well, is your demand, greater than your space available? Are you looking for space? What are you looking at there?
So we've turned around. From this year and last year, we've turned down about 20 acres of land that we've. So one of the things that we get a lot of offers for is peri-urban or rural land, and we often get offered several acres. Our mission is really to the mission of Revolutionary Earth is to transform urban waste and scarcity into an ecosystem. So we're really focused on the city, and we kill lawns, I tell people. So we're focused on transforming the urban setting into something that will grow food for people. For us, hyperlocal means that none of our produce travels more than 2 miles to get to where it's supposed to go. And we also have a commitment to harvest from within 24 hours of delivery. And then we also have a 2-touch policy. Our produce is never touched by more than 2 people. So the strange thing about those commitments is that we had those commitments before the pandemic, but they become extremely timely and important as we've tried to keep people safe. So.
Awesome. Bobby Drengler had his hand raised next.
Oh, thank you. Yes, excellent presentation. Thank you. Very informative. I'm referring to the year-round growing. I've been researching a little bit on year-round growing here in Minnesota, and the Canadians are a step ahead of us here. They've developed containerized growing, year-round growing, one container, fully equipped for year-round growing, supplies about 3 acres. And what they do, it costs about, ready-made, about 60,000. Maybe for your, you can get that down to about 40,000. But they're in their about 2nd year in development, and they've been very successful at it. And I've been keeping track of them, and I'll definitely keep you posted on their progress.
Please do. Yeah, we're always looking for really innovative ways to grow indoors.
And Yvonne actually had some connections regarding year-round growing or indoor growing as well, if you wanted to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, Matthew and Landon have been working on an indoor growing project for probably 2 or 3 years. They've built a growing facility. They actually built a really small one that sits in a food truck hub to kind of demonstrate it to people, but they have a whole system that they grew inside of a garage, like you were talking about, right? With the idea that it was going to be in containers. One of the things they talked about that you might find interesting too is the roof of the container. Containers aren't very attractive in an urban setting. You have a container setting there growing food. But their idea was to have the outside painted by artists. So it would be a mural space around the vertical sides of the doors and the sides, and that the roof would have a green roof.
Okay.
So they'd be kind of cool guys for you. I'll send you their contact info.
Sure, please do.
And then it looks like next, Gabrielle Kors has a question if you want to ask that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw that you asked it in the chat.
Oh, the chat. You can read it from the chat if you would like.
Are the funds raised going to the expansion of the project? So we sort of, in terms of the amount of land that we have, we underutilized it really dramatically this year. And so one of the primary concerns that kind of our watchword for next year is efficiency. We want to try and increase the amount of food that we get from the same amount of land. So we're actually not taking any new land or backyards for next year. We are working with another local group called the Village Community Garden and Learning Center. And they actually set up large-scale community gardens in the area. And so we'll be working with them on a plot. But besides that, that's the only thing that we're expanding on. So really, basically, the number one thing that's going to grow our efficiency is getting a professional farm manager in place to actually keep us smart with how we grow and what we grow and how we respond to challenges and things like that. I'm actually not the guy that knows anything about gardening. I'm just the organizer. And so people ask me sometimes, where did you get your degree in horticulture or anything like that? And I say, well, I don't have one. So, but yeah, I just, we really need to get some paid staff, and that's really where we're working to expand our capacity. So
awesome. Gary has some questions. Gary Schott.
Excuse me. Thank you. When you talked earlier about trying to engage teenagers, have you explored tapping into, and I don't know if Rochester has an FFA at any of their schools, but there's probably 4-H clubs. Have you had any engagement with them? It would seem like they would be a prime group to get some volunteers and broaden your base.
So we have kind of a list of groups that we think we want to engage with. The number one would be for us is the organizations that are actually working in the neighborhoods that we're in. So we're actually in a smaller part of Rochester. We are really work on the east side and southeast and a little bit on the northeast side. And these are kind of older neighborhoods. They tend to be a little bit more diverse. And so we are trying to work with the Boys and Girls Club and with a couple other local groups. We want to put, ultimately, we want to put our subscriber households in charge of what we're doing. And so we want to include, that includes the youth. We have about 100 children in our subscriber households put together. We're hoping that we can draw from those households the teenagers that are willing to, kind of give back.
And then Sean Spence had a question, and then after Sean's question gets answered, I'll have one of the organizers ask the final 1 million cups question.
Well, this is a question suggestion that I thought during the first 10 seconds of your presentation, this might be where you were going. And if I wasn't busy, I would kind of steal the kernel of your idea and do this myself. I think that in addition to what you're doing, you should give some thought to becoming the Uber of gardening. Because, and I've never seen anything like this. I saw the creation of the startup, weekend event of the Uber of hunting, right? Where people would provide, would let people hunt on their land. And that company is actually, it ended up getting funding out of my little town in Silicon Valley. They're now a multi-million-dollar company. And what I thought you were going to say at first was, what we do is we let people make their yard or other land available to people who want to garden, because this will help solve the food insecurity problem, because a lot of people who are poor or organizations or whatever, all they really need is a place to do the gardening. And there are people like me with yard space who would be happy to make that available for small gardens or others. I grew up on a 14-acre yard in my neighborhood, and we would have made 3 acres if somebody wanted it. We would have made it available, right? So anyway, I think you guys should go create the Uber of gardening, which would be $1 billion company, and then you do an awful lot for food insecurity, and you could still do exactly what you're doing too.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's not something that's outside the realm of possibility for us in the future. One of the niches that we fill in our community is that community gardens, places where people can go and have a plot, are really great. They really empower a lot of people, and especially with, I mentioned before, the village. They work to make sure that they empower lots of minority communities, especially refugee and former refugee communities, to be able to grow their own food. It's really, really empowering. It's actually also, don't want to offend all of the able-bodied people in the room, but it's also an ableist solution, because it requires so much to be able to get there. And I like your idea is actually solving a mobility issue, which is a huge problem in Rochester that doesn't have adequate public transportation. But once you get to the garden, if you're physically or mentally disabled, if you have especially this year, if you're immune compromised and you can't be close to other people, these are the people that we are sort of starting with first, the people that we need to make sure that we connect with. And so over 25% of our population is has a physical disability or is immune compromised, undergoing chemotherapy, something like that. So the mobility piece is a huge thing, and yeah, your idea really solves the mobility issue, but we also do have this this issue of disability, and that's sort of where we're starting. Certainly, if you let me steal your idea, I can make it happen.
It's yours.
So,
By the way, nobody in this room knows this, but I am a wheelchair user. So that's exciting to me that you're doing that. So thanks for making that a focus of what you do.
okay, thanks.
Thank you. And before one of our organizers asks the last question, I just want to comment that one of the things that has excited me about these meetings is the amount of times that one presenter has advice or feedback for the other. You guys are both right in the weeds of, developing your own businesses or nonprofits or whatever it is, and you're experiencing these things daily, so you have a lot to offer. So I want to make sure you guys both know there is an open invitation for you guys, if you're available, to join any of our future meetings in the audience. We see a lot of good feedback coming from the presenters. But with that, I'll turn it over to Caitlin for the final 1 Million Cups question.
All right, Christopher, what can we as a community do for you?
So don't discount the distance between Rochester and Mankato. We can have a really fun and exciting discussion over a computer. We could work together over computer as well. Like I said, you're not going to beat Norway for being outside of Rochester. So please consider bringing your expertise as entrepreneurs to our organization. We really, when we get talented people in place, we have a really great system to make their talent do a lot of good for people. So that is what I would ask is don't let the distance between us come between us.